This is a guest essay written by Ariel Yari, who writes about current events, politics, religion, and other things.
The emergence of a people, a short history of the Jews. The origins of the Iron Age people that would become the Hebrews and later the Israelites is one of much scholarly debate. While a plethora of scholars have concluded that the Israelites emerged from nomadic and/or disaffected Canaanite populations sometime after the Bronze Age collapse, other more maximalist archaeologists and biblical scholars alike have accepted the Bible's claim of the Israelites emerging from Egyptian servitude, making their way to the quote-unquote promised land. Regardless, we have several peoples that speak a common language present in and around Canaan from at least the 14th century BCE. The first explicit mention of a people living in Canaan called Israel, that is extra-biblical, appears in the Merneptah Stele, circa the year 1208 BCE. At this point in time, the Israelites were still a collection of tribes. They would not become a cohesive nation until the unification of the 12 tribes of Israel under the Davidic monarchy. After the reign of Solomon, due to political and religious conflict, the united monarchy split into the two kingdoms of Israel and Judah. However, when the threat of Assyria arose from the east, the Levantine kingdoms formed a military alliance to repel the threat of Assyrian dominance of the region. After a subsequent invasion by Assyria and Judah's capitulation to Assyria to become a vassal, the kingdom of Israel was invaded, conquered, and depopulated. Judah managed to keep its independence for about another 100 years, despite an eventual invasion by Assyria under Sennacherib, and after an eventual revolt by the Judean king spurred on by the Egyptians. The Babylonians invaded, destroyed the temple, blinded the king, Zedekiah, and sent a large number of the native Judean population into exile. After Cyrus the Great conquered the Babylonian Empire, he permitted the exiled Judeans to return to their native land. The Judeans lived very peaceful lives under the Persian Empire. They were allowed to rebuild their temple, practice their religion, and govern themselves, more or less. This did not change after Alexander came storming out of Macedonia and conquered the Persian Empire. After Alexander's death, his expansive empire was divided among his generals. While Judea was originally governed by the Ptolemaic kingdom, whose center was in Egypt, the Levant was conquered by their rivals to the north, the Seleucids. Under Seleucid rule, Hellenization was enforced as a way to centralize the empire. However, many Greek customs, such as the taboo against circumcision and building a gymnasium outside of the Jewish temple, where everyone who could afford was required to and had to go naked, in violation of Jewish modesty laws. Other unprovoked attacks on Jewish religion and culture forced them to rebel against the Seleucids and proclaim their own state, the Second Jewish Commonwealth or the Hasmonean Kingdom. The Hasmonean Kingdom managed to remain independent and even asserted a certain amount of dominance in politics in the Levant until Rome barged its way in. From the start, there was always tension between the Romans and the Judeans. Wherever Rome had set foot, it was glad to let the native peoples continue practicing their local customs and worshiping their local gods, as long as they paid fealty to the empire by sacrificing an animal to Jupiter and the emperor. While most other cultures within the Roman world were fine to participate in this seemingly insignificant show of loyalty to Rome, it clashed headfirst with the vehemently monotheistic Judeans. They refused these practices, which in turn angered the Roman government. After further antagonization and alienation of Judea under the Romans, Judea revolted, beginning what is known as First Roman-Jewish War. The Jews, while managing to fend off the Romans at first, sufficiently angered the Roman legionaries, which called for backup from the emperor, causing them to gain the upper hand. They sacked Jerusalem, destroyed the temple once again, as the Babylonians had done, and sent large swaths of the Judean population into exile. A second and third revolt against Roman rule brought the full weight of the Roman military upon Judea. It was absolutely devastated, forcing even more of the population to seek other options in different lands. After these revolts, as an extra sting to the Jews, Their homeland was renamed after the name of two of their historical rivals, Assyria and the Philistines, and was called Syria Palestina. The aftermath of the revolts caused most of the Jewish communities not forcibly deported by the Romans to flee to other lands in order to survive. The captives of the Roman Jewish wars were brought back to the frontier area of the empire to serve as slaves to the soldiers who received new plots of land for their service during the rebellions. Due to the result of incursions and raids by Germanic tribes, Emperor Vespasian conquered some of that territory and allotted it to the soldiers, and they and their Jewish slaves were relocated to this territory. In Hebrew, this area was known as Ashkenaz, and therefore the Jews living there became the first Ashkenazi Jews. Are Ashkenazi Jews still Middle Eastern? For one, after Christianity became the dominant religion of the Roman Empire, and later of Europe as a whole, apostasy from Christianity was punishable by death. The same thing was true of Islam later, after it came to dominate the Middle East and North Africa. Now, this is not to say there was no genetic influx from local populations. However, the impact this had on Jewish genetics is overestimated by those not familiar with the data. So, the question remains, how Middle Eastern are Ashkenazi Jews, if they are at all? For that, we need to look at the genetic data. Luckily for us, there have been genetic studies on Jews going back at least 20 years, so there is a plethora of data on the subject. Various studies regarding the genetic admixture of Ashkenazi Jews, their relation to other Jewish and Middle Eastern populations, have been published and are widely available to the public. That said, most people, Jews included, tend to be very ignorant of them. The vast majority of the studies conducted have concluded one thing: Ashkenazi Jews are in fact Middle Eastern in genetic terms. For example, a study conducted in the year 2000 by Harry Osterer, professor of pathology and genetics and Yeshiva University's Albert Einstein College of Medicine, determined that, quote, Jews and Arabs are all really children of Abraham. All have preserved their Middle Eastern genetic roots over 4,000 years. Led by a team of researchers from all over the world, Osterer's study found that the Y chromosomal mutations found among Jews showed that Jews worldwide did not genetically diverge to any significant degree among themselves, while the genetic variation between other non-Jewish Middle Eastern and European populations, respectively, was much more pronounced, suggesting evidence of a common and recent Jewish origin in the Middle East. Jews, as a whole, also showed close genetic affinity with other non-Jewish Middle Eastern populations, such as Syrians, Lebanese, and Palestinians. Subsequent studies about the patrilineal genes of most Jews have found that Jews are closer to non-Arab Middle Eastern populations from the Fertile Crescent than they are to Arabs. The matrilineal descent of Ashkenazi Jews show that about half of all Ashkenazi Jews are descended from 4 women of Middle Eastern descent, and that these mtDNA lines underwent expansion in Europe. Ashkenazi Jews do have Southern European admixture on their matrilineal lines, mostly from Greek and Italian converts during the Roman era. However, the roots of Ashkenazi matrilineal lines remain Middle Eastern, with there being little to no influx from Northern and Eastern European populations to Jewish ones. Some studies have suggested that Ashkenazi Jewish mtDNA have roots primarily in Southern Europe, but this claim has been contradicted by others. We have now firmly established the Middle Eastern origin of Jews pretty conclusively. Both the patrilineal and matrilineal lines of Ashkenazi Jews have Middle Eastern origins, and the patrilineal DNA of Ashkenazi Jews cluster closely with other Middle Easterners. However, how does the composite of Ashkenazi Jewish DNA compare with other Jews and Levantines? Where do Jews fall in with Europeans, if they fall in at all? We are going to see how Jewish communities worldwide are connected to one another. As a bit of a preface, I must say that while the studies I will be referring to in this subsection definitively tie Jewish communities across the world to each other, they may have contradictory results on some other minor issues of Jewish DNA. Firstly, Ashkenazi Jews, in genome-wide studies, have been shown to contain high amounts of Levantine DNA. When compared to other Jewish populations, all Jews tend to cluster very closely together, being as genetically distant to each other as fourth or fifth cousins are. Studies have also found that Jews have a distinct genetic profile from their non-Jewish neighbors. Jews were found to have more in common with one another than with their non-Jewish neighbors, and Jews tended to plot very closely with other Middle Eastern populations as well. Some Southern Europeans, such as Greeks and Italians, which is the result of genetic inflow into Ashkenazi and some Sephardi Jews during the Roman era. While discussion about how Middle Eastern or Ashkenazi Jews is up for considerable debate, most geneticists place it at around 50 to 55%, with the rest being Southern European. However, close genetic affinity between Jews worldwide places the Middle Eastern component of Ashkenazi Jews at 70%. In comparison to other Levantine populations, Ashkenazi Jews have been found to overlap with Syrians, Palestinians, Lebanese, Druze, and Samaritans to a significant degree. Some studies have even found that Ashkenazi Jews and Palestinians are closer to each other than either population are to Europeans or Africans. Druze have been found to be the closest Levantine population to Jews, as well as the Lebanese clustering closer to Jews than Syrians or Palestinians cluster to Jews. When compared to Samaritans, an Israelite group related to Jews that never left the Levant, a close affinity was found between the patrilineal descent of Samaritans and Jews worldwide. Judaism as a religion, a universal message, or a tribal mission. Most people in the West and in the Middle East are familiar with both an Islamic and Christian conception of religion, generally speaking. Both are evangelical, meaning they are for converting as many people as possible in order to bring them to the true faith. Judaism is the opposite. It does not view itself as a universal religion. Rather, it is a religion that was appointed for a specific tribe and people. This does not quote-unquote damn the rest of humanity, though, since Judaism does not see itself as the sole path to God. Christianity and Islam are seen as positive developments in human history, turning humanity away from paganism to monotheism. Judaism was meant as a specific covenant formed between God and the Jewish people on Mount Sinai. While Jews are supposed to be a positive influence on the surrounding peoples and are meant to be a so-called light unto the nations, we do not seek or encourage conversion. Judaism, much like Mandeism, Druze, or Yazidis, are decidedly an ethno-religion. It is this reason why Jews have remained relatively genetically isolated from their neighbors for the past 2,000 years. There was Southern European input, as demonstrated earlier, by Greek and Roman converts. However, Jews did not seek to convert their host populations, and their host populations did not seek to convert. This leaves us now with an interesting question. If Judaism does not seek out converts, and is strictly speaking an ethno-religion, where do converts fit into the fabric of the Jewish people? Converts. Lost Jews. This is where things get a tad confusing. Judaism is largely an ethno-religion, and we do not encourage conversion. In fact, it's encoded in Jewish law that a prospective convert to Judaism is to be turned down at least 3 times, and the conversion process is oftentimes prolonged and made intentionally difficult. But converts have also been some of the most important people in Jewish history. Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, and the inventor of the Jewish legal system, was a Midianite convert. Onkelos, the great translator of the Torah into Aramaic, was a Roman convert. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Meir, 2 of the rabbis responsible for the foundation of the oral tradition, were descendants of converts to Judaism. Shemaiah and Avtalion, leaders of the Sanhedrin and links in the chain of the oral tradition, were Babylonian converts. To say that converts have played an important role in Jewish history is an understatement at best. They have shaped our history in a major way. So, how does this jive with what we said earlier, that Judaism is an ethno-religion meant exclusively for the Jewish people? Judaism has an answer to this question. Yes, we are an ethno-religion that doesn't generally accept converts, but we don't view converts as converts. The conversion process to Judaism is purposely drawn out and made difficult. It can take years for a prospective convert to finalize his or her conversion if they don't drop out before then. It is engineered like this for the reasons I mentioned above. But there is another very important reason. Converts to Judaism are seen as Jewish souls that accepted the Torah on Mount Sinai and, for whatever reason, got lost somewhere along the way. Those souls long to return to their people. However, there must be a vetting process first. This is where the drawn-out conversion process stems from. A lot of people have passing moments of religious fervor and passion. A surge of inspiration hits them, and they have a desire to become more religious and more devout. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this, and it can be quite beautiful if pointed in the right direction. Oftentimes, though, people who are spiritually motivated will make spur-of-the-moment decisions that will drastically impact them. This happens with a lot of prospective converts to Judaism. Therefore, in order to ensure that this person's conversion is born out of a real commitment to return to the Jewish people and not a rash decision based on hype and fervor, the conversion process is intentionally drawn out. Epilogue. What's the point? I've spent the past 4 to 5 days writing and putting this essay together, so the question might be asked, what was the point? The anti-Semites who denied Jewish belonging in the Middle East will continue to deny. I'm aware of that, and this essay is not meant for them. The target audience of this essay is for those Jews and non-Jews who might be well-intentioned, yet generally ignorant about Jewish origins and history. That said, this essay is not meant to bring a definitive end to the Israeli-Palestinian debate, if such a thing were even possible, or to delegitimize Arab presence in the Levant or Israel. Just to illustrate that to call Ashkenazi Jews invaders or colonizers shows a lack of historic and scientific knowledge.